in reference to all of the memes going around because Alexandra sent me one. Um, and they always, every time I come across those, they get me so heated because what I'm talking about is these memes that go around of, it'll be the ending scene of Jack and Rose kissing and reuniting in what I believe to be heaven, and most people I think believe to be heaven. And they say, what about the guy that, Rose married and spent however many years with? He's probably at some gate in heaven waiting there, checking, his watch, wondering where she is. Meanwhile, she's with Jack. And this goes around a lot lately. I don't know if it's just because my algorithm is so Titanic attuned that like I see it more often than other people, but it does go around a lot. And it is oddly part of this weird vendetta that people have against Rose as a character and this like desire to want to paint her as like some sort of villain in the movie, and they use this as one way to do that. So that gets me mad. And so, but anyway, that's like not.
Welcome to Season 3 of Titanic Talk. Nelson Aspen and Alexandra Boyd launch once again onto the digital airwaves with some very special event episodes. Here we feature stories from the independent documentary Ship of Dreams Titanic Movie Diaries and continue to explore all aspects of the iconic ship. From James Cameron's epic, groundbreaking movie to the history and legacy of Titanic herself. Actors, historians, authors, descendants and fans come here to talk about Titanic. This is your first-class ticket to everything aboard the Ship of Dreams.
Welcome to another episode of Titanic Talk with Nelson Aspen, that's me, and Alexandra Boyd, that's she. And those are our pronouns for today anyway. So the thing about Titanic that we have found over the years is there are so many what ifs. Historically speaking, what if they had been going slower? What if the iceberg hadn't been there? What if they had turned this way? But I think there are also a lot of what ifs about the film as well. What if there had been other actors cast in the roles? What if Jack had gotten up on the floating panel? Would that have made a difference? But it occurred to me recently the what ifs about the great love story of Jack and Rose. So we all know, spoiler alert, if you've never seen the film, that Jack doesn't make it, but Rose masquerades as Rose Dawson and goes on to presumably live a very, very full life, as evidenced by when we first see her as Gloria Stewart, she's wearing diaphanous clothes, she's lived to be over 100, she's taken up pottery, and from the pictures on her nightstand, we know she had a glamorous life, she was an aviatrix and liked horseback riding. So she has, most importantly, she has a granddaughter who takes care of her. So how did she get that granddaughter? Unless she was pregnant when she left Titanic and then went on to procreate, she must have found love again after Jack, or at least some guy. So I said to Alexandra, can we do a hypothetical what if episode of Titanic Talk? Who would have captured Rose's heart if in fact it was captured at all after the events of the film? And Alexandra came up with the perfect panel. Tell us more, Alex.
Well, the perfect panel had to encompass people, enthusiasts, fans, those so passionate about the film and the story in the film and the main theme through the film, which I think many people agree on, which is that we are following Rose through the ship, but we're also following her extraordinary arc, extraordinarily repressed and repressed is not the word, but Edwardian England was not women. Stifled. I love that. And I love, the metaphor of the corset, actually keeping her in place, and her horizon was very small. And meeting somebody like Jack who just blew her world apart over that 48 hours and as the ship is sinking. So not one, but two of our previous guests on Titanic Talk, both of whom are also stars with us in Ship of Dreams Titanic Movie Diaries, could only be Brittany Butler from Titanic Scene by Scene. If you haven't heard her podcast that goes from naught to the end, where have you been living on a Titanic rock? And Zach Douglas in Australia, who has the most extraordinary collection of props and costumes from the film. What a fantastic group to sit here and just muse, just what do they call it? Blue sky thinking, spitballing about Rose's life post Titanic and post Jack. Welcome, Brittany. Welcome, Zach. Thank you so much for coming.
Hello.
Now, have Brittany and Zach interacted before ever together? Yes.
We've chatted a couple of times on the socials, which has been fantastic. That's a wonderful thing about the internet is we're also interconnected.
And we talked in one of these situations before for the
Yes, we have. Yeah, right.
Yes.
Well, then it's wonderful and we're all family, but I just think that this is a brilliant discussion with you two particularly, because I can't imagine anyone knows the minutia of the film better than the two of you. So, well, Brittany, we'll start with you. When we sent you the sort of proposal and said, hey, would you want to talk about this? What was your first thought?
Well, my first thought was in reference to all of the memes going around because Alexandra sent me one. And they always, every time I come across those, they get me so heated because what I'm talking about is these memes that go around of, it'll be the ending scene of Jack and Rose kissing and reuniting in what I believe to be heaven, and most people I think believe to be heaven. And they say, what about the guy that, Rose married and spent however many years with? He's probably at some gate in heaven waiting there, checking, his watch, wondering where she is. Meanwhile, she's with Jack. And this goes around a lot lately. I don't know if it's just because my algorithm is so Titanic attuned that I see it more often than other people, but it does go around a lot. And it is oddly part of this weird vendetta that people have against Rose as a character and this desire to want to paint her as some sort of villain in the movie, and they use this as one way to do that. So that gets me mad. And so but anyway, but that's not that's not necessarily
I'm very child get mad. I listened to your podcast through from the beginning. I found you in the middle and then we went to the end, and I started at the beginning and now I'm in, and I enjoy your point of view on the story and the script and the visuals and everything so much. It's so smart, and I can see how deeply connected you are to the story, as are hundreds of thousands, millions of people who've seen the film. It does feel like it's like listening to you speak. It's like, people who love Jane Austen characters. Elizabeth Bennet is like this icon of, female Jane Austeniness, and we want to be like her. We want to embody her and be smart and sassy and all of those things. So when you have a character very similar to that, like Rose, you're going, well, how could she possibly have a flaw? But maybe, we're all flawed as human beings. However good and kind people are, there's nearly always some skeleton in the closet, even if it's a little bone. It's I think you're right. Zach, what do you think? Where does your heart and your mind go once the credits roll on Titanic?
Well, it's interesting that Brittany says about algorithms. Well, I mean, my algorithm that always comes up in regards to the topic that we're talking about is that old Rose is always just banging on about some really good D that she got back on a cruise ship back in the day. So I kind of feel like there's a multitude, there's a sub layer here too, is, well, Was it Rose's first time? Did she lose her virginity on Titanic, or is it a case of it was just a little dalliance that is very, very memorable that sticks in her mind? So, I mean, I made some notes. I don't know whether anybody else did.
And he's set decorated. I will put, for those of us who are seeing this on YouTube, you will notice that behind Zach, we
They're
see
all
the
her
very
stuff.
framed photos that we see in the
Well,
film.
because I sort of tried to pick all of the old Rosie sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Last night I was, because it's very early in the morning here, I was last night sort of thinking I need anything that's like old Rose related. They're going to want like old Rose in this. Do you know what I mean?
Hey, that's a, I mean, this is an episode for us to talk about hypotheticals. Did Rose lose her virginity to Jack, or perhaps she already had lost it to Cal?
He does infer, doesn't he? I thought you were going to come to me last night.
Yeah, I know, which is always
Like,
kind of a little bit of like, are they or aren't they? Are they, aren't they? Are they sharing beds? Are they not?
beds, yes, bed sharing.
Well, no, I think we talked about it on our podcast too. Like, I think I always thought that that was Cal trying to cross that bridge with her and her constantly like putting up a wall there. And I think that one line was him having hope that, he'd hoped that it would finally happen last
The
night or
door was
whatever,
always open
you
from his
know.
point of view. Yes.
Everyone always remembers their first time. And I always kind of feel like, is that the point of the story here? That she's sort of referring back to her first time in the backseat of a car. So you can sort of think, well, for anyone that's ever done like it in the back seat, like they'll remember, like, you remember that first. There we go. Do you know what I'm saying? Like we
December
always
16th,
remember.
1979. Oh, I'm sorry.
For Rose to have sort of gone off and had her own life too afterwards, you've got to remember at the end of the day, she got off that ship with nothing. She had a sloppy dress and some scuffed shoes, and that was virtually all that she walked away with at the end of the day. She couldn't go back to um, good, high society because everybody knew her. Like, it was a very small claustrophobic environment. Everybody knew everybody's business back then. So essentially, she would have had to have gone down the road of marrying and looking for love in a more demure, lower social demographic. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
Yes.
so the whole thing is like tipped on its head for her. I mean, you've only got to look at the introduction that we get to Old Rose. She's not living a very glamorous life. I mean, it's quite.
It's the thing that never ever makes sense to me, that she hung on to that necklace and didn't ever sell it at auction for her family, for her, for Susie Amos' character, all of those.
Because wouldn't you be pissed if you were the granddaughter of someone that's like hawking this, and just throws it so precariously into the ocean like it's meant nothing? But,
I,
I
I
mean,
Which
I'm sure
is
my family would have something to say about it. Just so.
which is another thing people love to use to paint Rose as a villain. Oh, she could have set her family off for life if she, turned that in, or at least and it's like we forget about metaphor when we're watching movies. We forget about messaging and, oh, it was a rejection of, material life. Like, that's what it was. But everybody loves to harp on, the literal when it comes to that. But
yes, I think that's right. I think if she had it, and if she'd sold it, and in our imaginations had this very comfortable life, it would have made a whole sort of, like, her experience with Jack would have meant nothing, because he was the one showing her what real life can be versus this very privileged life, trapped life that she was able to escape. I mean, your point is really good, Zach, about she walks off the ship in a coat and a flimsy dress and some slippers. And what does she do? What could we imagine she
No,
did?
no.
You know,
What's her first point? Is she going to sort of, go to the corner bar and have a drink? Like she's going to need something to eat? Like what does she do from that point? Like
dodging
there has
Ruth
to be
as well,
some sort of
dodging
like
her mother.
monetary gain to get to that next point. Like how do you don't just go through life for free. Like she's going to have to do something. And I often sort of think, well, what was that next step?
I never thought about that, right? As soon as she docks on the Carpathia, like, first of all, she has to avoid her family and anybody else
Exactly.
on the
Yeah.
ship in order to get off. When they're at the dock, like, how did they not cross paths accidentally when she was getting to wherever
She
she
would
needed to
have
go?
been interviewed at the Inquiry, or at the very least by Walter Lord when he wrote Night to Remember. And but maybe she never did have children of her own. Like maybe her child was adopted that gave birth to Susie Amos's character, who's I wish we had a name. She probably did have a name. What is the granddaughter?
Lizzie.
Lizzie.
Yeah.
Of course,
Lizzie.
he knows.
That's never mentioned in the film, though, is it? We never hear
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, yeah, it is.
Where is it?
Have you met my granddaughter Lizzie? She
Oh,
takes care of me.
oh, okay. Great.
Yeah.
Touche. Yeah, so maybe Lizzie isn't her blood granddaughter. Or maybe she married a widower with children or something. So who knows? I mean, do you ever create this scenario? I mean, this is fan fiction waiting
hmm
to be written. I see it as a graphic novel or something. Do you have a theory, Brittany? Or a
Oh,
preferred theory?
for the second she got off the ship, or
Yeah, well, just for what Rose's life was like.
mm,
She obviously spent a lot of time given by those photographs in Santa Monica at the
yes.
pier,
Gone
and
across the
riding the
country
horse.
somehow. Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say that's another point too, is that she's had to migrate from one portion of your country to the other. So, you know, how did she do that? Like, again, you can't just, was she just, I don't know,
Hiking.
hitchhiking? I don't know. Like,
I mean, I don't know either, but like I think again, this ties back to the memes of, her potentially going to Jack first in heaven or whatever, or spending forever with Jack in heaven. Is that so much of what she did is because of Jack. And so I feel like she probably just took a lot of cues from what she learned from him, maybe. I mean, how did he get anywhere? You know what I mean? It's like he had nothing, but he, made his way place to place, like he said, just hopping boats here and there. Or we also had that deleted scene, Rose's Dreams, where she talks about, wanting to be an actress or whatever, clearly based on the headshot that we see on the dresser at the end. She made that happen somehow. That's what I always thought. Like that picture, you can see it right there behind Zach. Uh, yep, yep. It looks like. I mean, I don't know if that was ever confirmed, but seems like she had some sort of acting career, which also begs the question: how did her family never notice if she was in a movie or if she was on, in theater or something? You do
She
wonder,
Did,
went
did
don't
to
you?
Ruth?
Hollywood and got a nose job and
Yeah.
married a
Did
producer.
did Ruth try to, contact her again? I mean, there's that. Ruth was no, shrinking violet. She would have found a way to contact her, and even though Ruth again is a slightly villainous character, she wanted the best for everyone, mostly herself, but she wanted the best for Rose as well. I can't imagine that she wouldn't have found her, or Rose just, you know, didn't respond to correspondence.
And had some
Yeah.
interesting, Ruth had a couple of interesting lines about her late husband that sort of clue you in how she would have felt about men. Brittany, what I find fascinating is you've made me think like that you find yourself in the position to defend the character of Rose against online bullying, hatred, conspiracy theories, etc. Zach, do you feel that? Uh, what is your feeling about Rose? Do you have an affection for her? Have you encountered that kind of Rose hate? This is news to me.
oh God, yeah, absolutely. I'm a little bit on the fence about it because yeah, I kind of see that Rose was very irresponsible. You've got to think about it in a 1912 perspective. What Rose did was extremely selfish. She put herself first, which a woman in that situation would never have done in Edwardian society. You've got to really hone in on that. Um, but I guess that's Cameron's message in the film is that money at the end of the day is irrelevant. She made reference to in the deleted scene about being poor but free, and that's kind of where I see her going afterwards, that money was just not really her key focus. It was she wanted to live a life of happiness. She wanted to be free, and she didn't want to have that life expectation of who she is supposed to be. So, yeah, did that? I don't know if that really answered your question.
Do you ever muse about Rose's life post Titanic? I mean, the man she might have found. I mean, we're all we like to believe there's only one person for us, but that we know that that's not true. You can love more than one person over the course of 100 years.
Oh, totally agree. I think we find, I think we find something that we can learn from everybody in any interaction that we have in life. I think I fantasize more about like what happened with Ruth and Cal, and I go into that sort of Edwardian culture side of things, whereas Rose, I feel like because she's rebelled against it, it doesn't resonate with me quite so much. But I'm happy for her. Good for you, girl. Like,
Well, we
off
know
you
what
go.
happened to Cal. It didn't end well for him.
Like, what a dramatic story to be told, too, that he felt, at the end of the day, Cal felt the pressures of society and expectation and wealth, and he literally put a pistol in his mouth. So,
And he had his
that's,
own family too at that point.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well,
It's
she'd have ended
funny.
up penniless anyway then. If she had married him, she'd have ended up with nothing if he lost everything in the crash.
We talk a lot about the post-traumatic stress aspect of that such a disaster would have on people. And now you've got me thinking about, well, what would Rose, Rose was pretty, even though she kept it a secret for 100 years, but then she was pretty quick to tell her tale and revisit it all and tell her story. But I don't get any hints of PTSD from the character of Rose.
Or is the fact that she needed to tell that story enough PTSD to push her over? Because if you've kept a secret your entire life, of course she's going to offload in one ginormous, 3 hour blur. Like,
And that's why I think, it's still debated, but I think to me, I think it's clear that she passes away at the end of the movie.
I agree.
And so I feel like she held on to that secret for her whole life. She finally let it out, and it must have been like the craziest weight off of her shoulders, and she was able to pass. Like that's why you know what I mean? It's almost
I
like
don't like to believe that she would have. I don't like the ending that she would have thrown the necklace into the sea. I would like to think, conversely, that rather than keeping that treasure and that secret from Lizzie, maybe she wrote it down and maybe it was sitting in her dresser back at home, and Lizzie would have eventually found that along with the necklace. So she would have had not only the truth, but the inheritance.
Yeah, what
mm,
else was she planning on doing with the necklace? I also think, and this is sort of from personal experience too, when you have a short, very hot and heavy affair with somebody, it's very easy to fantasize your beautiful
oh,
life
yes.
together ever
Yeah.
after with no mortgage payments, kids, washing up duties, who's going to take out the trash. It's very easy to encapsulate that moment and bring it through with you through your life versus marrying anybody else and being in a marriage and being in a long-term relationship, which we all
And real life, real
it's
life.
real life. Yeah, real life is
Two
not
world wars and a depression and two world wars, real
yes,
life.
the Spanish flu. There's a lot that my grandparents' generation went through, and that what's inherited trauma that I'm aware of how the early half of the 20th century was a terrible time for a lot of people who just were caught up in it. And hers started with Titanic. And we've also looked at other people who survived with survivor's guilt and depression, many of the crew in particular, who really did not live a good life afterwards. It was a literally a life-changing event. And for her, even in a fictional sense, I think, we have to give her credit that she was this very strong individual. I actually don't think she's super selfish. I think if it was a man who'd done any of the things that she she did, we'd have gone like, yay, yay, that's strength of character. But in a woman, it's seen as self-serving. And I think she just did what she needed to do. And sort of going back to like, I remember when I was an actress looking for work, I would do all sorts of, minimum wage jobs to carry me through. And she's well educated. She could do a lot, well read. She could do a lot of things probably to get her to Hollywood and start working. And then, of course, she's beautiful, so and emotional and smart. She would have, it doesn't surprise me at all that she could have been a movie star.
Or Rosie the Riveter. I mean, she could have just been she could have done that as well. What's going to be fascinating is to see what the comments are on this episode,
Oh,
because now
we have to
what we
invite
have
Carl.
done is stimulate everybody's imagination and hypotheses to weigh in on this. I don't know. Are there any other characters that stay with you the way this scenario stays with us?
I don't know. I was taking notes on something Alexandra was saying. Um,
Do tell.
if you don't mind.
No,
Um,
awesome.
when you mentioned or you thought like what else could she have been like holding on to the necklace for? Like what other thing? There is a deleted scene where she says a direct quote of the hardest part about being so poor was being so rich. Um, and that every time she thought about selling it, she thought of Cal, and that somehow she was able to make it without his help. So I think she just oddly kept it for like a weird sense of motivation or
Oh,
something.
yeah. Yes.
Um, and she also couldn't sell it, I don't think, because isn't wouldn't that have
Traceable.
been somewhat traceable? Like if
Yes, yes.
Mm.
suddenly someone goes running into a pawn shop or something with, this bazillion-dollar necklace that, is compared to the Hope Diamond and everything.
Oh, look.
There you
Oh, so
go.
you had it the whole time.
How much for it, Governor? How much?
Zach just pulled that right out of his pocket.
I have a ring version of it too, but I forgot to put it on. It's in my it's in my
Zach, what other notes do you
thoughts.
have there? You said you had some notes. You've got some.
Well, because I often wonder about, well, what kind of a guy was the person that she ends up hooking up with? And it got me thinking last night, well, like I said before, she couldn't have picked anybody in high society. That's completely ruled out for her because she would have blown her own cover. So I sort of think, well, was it some, like, I don't know, big Texan brute that makes it good in oil? Like, I don't know. Like, was it a cultural attaché that, teaches her about, the cultures of the world and life and love? And, or was it another immigrant that she sort of completely just sort of weaves her way into society with all of the other immigrants that influxed into America and made a completely brand new and life of her own because they would have known no different? So,
I like that theory. Plus, no one would have spotted her. She could have
or
really
questioned
maintained
her
her
either.
anonymity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because we're talking about Calvert, right?
Well, oh yeah, true, right? So
Because
you kind of,
she married a guy. So whoever like that guy, like who was he? And of course though, because like we said, she could have been with more than one person over the course of her
Long.
4 years.
years since Titanic, so but she did end up marrying that guy for however, but we don't know because that's the thing where a lot of people say, what happened to, where's Rose's husband in this situation and in because we know he died because Lewis says that Calvert's dead right at the beginning of the movie. So, um, you wonder how long was that marriage? It could have only been a couple years. They could have been divorced. You know what I mean? Like all these things where you think, um, that I don't think people think of when they mindlessly contribute to those memes that go around as well of just,
Yes, that it may have ended badly, or yeah, and she didn't make the right choice, or it was short lived. Yes, I like that.
Could
I
she
like
have been a single mother? Maybe Calvert was a made up, Calvert.
I did
Maybe it
always
was
think that
made
was
up.
oddly close of a name, honestly. Every time I thought about that last name.
Is there any possibility? Let's assume that they did actually do it in the car, or maybe she did it with Cal on the ship. I don't know. Would it? would it be a possibility that she left Titanic pregnant?
Pregnant.
I mean, I feel like, isn't that always like the biggest fan fiction theory of
It's certainly
she
soapy. I mean, that if we were watching EastEnders or General Hospital, that would be the scenario.
Since Cameron set it up with the encounter in the back of the car, it's not beyond the realms of possibility at all.
I'm
Still would
sure.
be a paternity question.
Oh yeah, well yeah. I mean, I know for a fact that there were lots of fanfics like, oh, Rose actually got pregnant with Jack's baby after everything and whatever, but my thought always goes to how would it have survived in those frigid temperatures? I I don't know.
Hello, frozen embryo.
I mean, I mean, yeah, but I
Well,
mean,
now
there's
I feel like we're at a pajama party and we just finished watching Titanic and we're all gonna do, like play what about or what if. So now it
I
might
mean,
might
Rose almost died. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that
and
like
yet
it could
it's
have.
become this romance. I mean, Titanic has been romanticized before and since James Cameron's film. I mean, it was obviously romantic to him sufficiently to create that Romeo and Juliet story. So here's my question for the panel. If you could be with any Titanic character based on a historical figure or out of the furtive imagination of James Cameron's mind, who is the character you would be most attracted to from the 1997 world of Titanic? Brittany?
Well, I mean, I think for every 90s girl, it's gonna be Jack. You
Right?
know what I mean? For me, I mean, for a lot of reasons, I've always loved the character, just the mindset. I mean, I got make a count tattooed on me. We know this. This is from his speech. Got it on my wall over here, so, and then of course, like I said, just every young girl who grew up in the 90s and 2000s, young Leo was just everything is if we're talking about attraction. So, yeah.
I'm the polar opposite. I'm sorry, Brittany, but the for me, I was rooting for Cal. I feel like I was a lot more sexually attracted to Cal's character. I think he was a lot more sort of suave, sophisticated. Leo never did anything for me. I'm sure we've had this conversation before, Alexandra, actually, that it wasn't until Gatsby when Leo was much, much older that I sort of went, hmm. I feel like Cal just, yeah, would have ticked the boxes. Yeah, we know he had a bad end, but I guess sexual attraction wise, the Officer Lowe, do we all? I think there's a bit
Oh,
of
is
a
there any? I mean, Alexandra knows this. Is there anybody alive out there?
Hmm.
yes.
Alexandra
Oh my
told me
God.
back it was 1997 after Alexandra had finished the film, and she was telling me stories from the set. And when we went to see the movie, and there I see him doing that whole thing with the light and looking, and that was the only officer that tried to go back for people. And I was like, wow, who's that? And he taught me how to correctly pronounce his name.
Johan Griffith, yeah, Griffith.
And and tell us and our listeners the story you told us about he was very musically inclined off camera.
Oh, yes. Well, we would all go to the bar of the resort where we were all being put up, and Irish Brian Walsh would bring his alien pipes and he would play in the bar. It was like being in the third class dance scene, although I didn't know that was going on because, we just knew our bits that we had filmed. And we'd sort of go around the room. It wasn't just Johan, it was Ewan Stewart, who played Murdoch, would get the guitar, and because he's Scottish, he would sing this beautiful Scottish folk song. And then Ewan stood up and sang Mifanwi, which is a very traditional Welsh song. And I remember Jonah, who was Leo's assistant, he sat there utterly mesmerized by this beautiful tenor voice that Johan has. And he's like, man, how do you know that song? And Johan went, everybody knows Myfanwy in Wales. You could Google it now and listen to all male Welsh choirs singing this beautiful, beautiful ballad. And then it would go back to Brian, and he'd play the pipes and play a jig. And it was just, oh, and then Craig Kelly. played Harold Bride, he was utterly obsessed with Oasis. So he was like, play Wonderwall, somebody play Wonderwall, which completely killed the atmosphere. But it was some of the most magical times, actually. And yes, Johan has the most beautiful voice.
And ever since you told me that story, I've always appreciated him even more as an actor because there was something relatable about hearing how he was off camera that has always made me enjoy. Didn't you do Horatio Hornblower? I think that was
Yes.
his first big thing after Titanic.
Yes.
He did the mini series of Horatio Hornblower, and I remember being captivated with. All right, so that'll be my choice. I'll go with Horatio Hornblower, who wasn't on the Titanic, but that would be my choice. Alexandra, do you have a choice?
I
Do you
do.
have
I
a
do.
Titanic crush?
Yes, I do, because and it's mostly to do with the person who played him. Actually, it's Derek Lee who plays Stoker Barrett. I just,
Oh yes! Oh my God! Oh,
I just love that moment when the doors are going good, 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 and the
pushing
water.
people out. Oh, putting others before himself, Alexandra.
I was like, yes, if I'm in a crisis, if I'm on a sinking ship, I want Derek Lee / Stoker Barrett to be by my side. And then my story about Derek is my very first short film is called Boxer on the Wilderness. You can find it on my Vimeo page and on YouTube. And I needed somebody to train these young actors in boxing from like First World War boxing, and through the people we were meeting to make a feature film about this boxer, Derek's name came up. You must know Derek because he was in Titanic as well. But of course, I hadn't met him at the time. So I call him up and I said, look, I've got this short film and I need you to come. And he shows up on the day, on his motorcycle. And he's all in like motorcycle gear with his helmet under his gorge. And then Zach's fanning himself. And then there's this moment. There are there are boxing sequences in the film. Now, bear in mind, this is my first directing. I directed something before, but this was something really close to my heart. And I had written these boxing sequences that built up to a denouement in the story. I was like, oh my God, Derek, we've not got we haven't got the bit with the him, the climax. He went, it's all right. I've already taught it to them. They're all ready to go. Come on, lads. And he saved the film. He just saved the film for me. He was just, and there are some gorgeous photographs of me describing to him how I want shot, and you could just see I'm just in raptures. He's just gorge. He's wonderful. And we interviewed him on Titanic Talk, so I'll put the link to that.
He's still hot.
He's done so much stunt work. He does the Bourne Ultimatum, all the James Bonds. I mean, everything. He coordinates, or he is a stunt person. He can barely remember them all. His IMDb is like so long.
My, simmer down, Alexandra. All right, so I think we have two assignments now for our listeners, not only to let us know what they think would have happened to the character of Rose, but also who's your Titanic crush? That is a very good question to pose to our audience.
That's what we really want to know.
Yes.
I think
I just have one more story though. Do you remember, Nelson, at Titanic weekend in April, there were two cousins who were descendants of a third-class passenger who survived. She was newly married, so it was not quite their honeymoon, but they were emigrating to America to start their married life, and he did not survive. She went on to marry somebody and have something like 12 children.
Yep.
But when she passed away, they found all these letters from this first husband that she had held onto and clearly just held a candle to her whole life. And she died in her 90s. It was a very sort of similar parallel story. And somebody's like, what about that poor bloke?
Yeah, well, it's to Brittany's point. So when she goes to the great staircase in the sky, who is she meeting at the top of the steps?
The guy that she didn't have to pay the mortgage with and do the washing up and take the trash out. Yeah, it's called a
There's
fantasy.
no mortgages in heaven, right?
They're all paid off.
Oh, it's amazing. All right, before we sign off, just I want to ask each of our guests if you have any final thoughts about the hypothetical world of Titanic. If there's just maybe one thing that you want to put out there in your wishes and your fantasies for Titanic.
Marry
Uh,
well. Just saying.
Very well. Just as easy to fall in love with a rich man as a poor man. I got
Yes.
told that when I was in my 20s more than once. Did you hear that pug snoring? That was the biggest snore. He just went.
My cat was just snoring. I tried to wake him up.
Because you are familiar to our Titanic Talk audiences, if we can just sort of quickly get each of you to say what you're up to now, what's next for you now, just a quick update.
How much time have we got? God, my life the last 12 months has been absolutely horrific for me. I left my job to start real estate. My principal boss fled the country with our trust account. She's now in Italy somewhere. Hi, if you're watching. I'm still waiting for my pay. So I've actually gone back to my previous profession, which was dog grooming. So I'm in the process of building a studio here in the Macedon Ranges. So yeah, I've done like full circle.
You can always hawk that necklace.
Because Nelson, the last conversation that we had together was if you needed to sell anything in the event that, what would you sell first? And I remember saying, I won't sell, I won't sell, I won't sell. In the last 12 months, I've actually had to seriously consider whether financially it's viable to keep everything. So it's interesting.
Hold on. The lifeboat's coming. I just know it is.
No, I hope so. Seriously, it's yeah.
All right. I'll see you in December when I'm in Sydney, and we'll talk this over drinks.
Yay!
All right, Brittany, how about you? What's going on?
I'm currently wrapping up my second year as a full-time kindergarten through eighth grade music teacher. So that's nice. It'll be summer and looking forward to a nice 3 months off to do some of my own personal projects. Ethan and I, my co-host of Titanic Scene by Scene, have since started a new podcast called the Y2K Phase, Phaze, where we talk about all sorts of movies and music and pop culture from the years 1997 to 2003. So we've been having a really good time with that. About 15 episodes into that one. So that's fun.
It's great. All I can say is that those are very lucky little kindergarten music students. I think you would just be the ultimate. If I were in kindergarten, to have Miss Brittany teaching me music would be ultimately just so wonderful. I can only imagine how much they adore you.
Thank you. They've put on very great Christmas and spring concerts. I've been told, not to brag, but I have been told that since I started working there, the quality of the performances has gone up and that the kids seem a lot more engaged. So I do take some pride in that. So
Good,
thank
as
you.
you should. Good. All right, panel. Thank you for being a part of this discussion and this rather offbeat episode of Titanic Talk, but it was fun. I think we should do more hypothetical discussions.
More hypothetical questions. I love that. Yes, more hypothetical questions. I think I just like saying hypothetical.
We send you lots of love and thank you for joining us. And Zach, thank you for getting up so early for us.
The best.
No, don't even get me started. Don't get me started.
Now you have the whole day.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review. And if you'd like to hear more podcasts like this, hit the subscribe button. For information on where you can see Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, go to shipofdreamsfilm.com. Titanic Talk is a production of Ship of Dreams Film Limited. We've launched a line of Titanic Talk merch. A cap, a mug, a tote, a t-shirt or a hoodie. You'll be sure to find a unique gift for the Titaniac in your life. Look for the link in the notes and on Instagram, or go to bit.ly/Titanic Talk Shop.